this walk through York here at Bootham Bar. I'm going to do the same again today, but for a rather different reason, because what I wanted us to do today was to have a little think about Halloween. Of course, we'll be still walking the same streets, looking at the same beautiful signs, so don't worry if Halloween is not your boat. But thinking about kind of what it means, where it comes from, how we celebrate it today, how that links to the older belief systems that underpin it, both Christian and kind of non-Christian, and we'll have a little look at the decorations. So I thought it would be quite a nice opportunity to have a little wander around and see to what degree in shop windows, either something fairly subtle, over here a pumpkin, to others that will be fully dressed, as you might say. So that's going to be the focal point. So we're starting here today, as we have so many times at Bootham Bar, a gateway, a physical gateway, a gateway that has been built to repel invaders, the outsiders. For the most part, given the location on the north side of the city, this was built to withstand the Scots. But at this time of year, at Halloween, we start to think about a different kind of invader. One for whom doors, gateways, armaments and stone may prove entirely useless. I'm speaking, of course, of the spirits, those that will come to us from a different realm. And don't worry if your belief system precludes the belief in spirits. We're going to look at that and think about where that could have come from, try and make sense of how it is that in the 21st century we're still kind of dealing with a muddle of medieval theology, which in effect represents Halloween. So we started here at Bootham Bar, the site of the Roman gateway to the city. As we pass through, we enter into the city of Ibracum. And the Romans are a kind of good place for us to start thinking about Halloween, because of course it's under the Romans that Christianity first comes to these shores. And for those who don't know, by the way, let's just kind of kick off. We'll come to Rome as a Constantine in a minute. Halloween, that we talk about now as being either an evening or a festival, depending on whereabouts you are, comes from a celebration of Hallowtide. Have we heard of Hallowtide before? I don't know how far the chat is behind, but do let me know if you're familiar with the term Hallowtide. It comes to popularity, that term, around about the 15th century, which is when the building that you're looking at here, black and white building here on the left-hand side, was being built. So they are kind of contemporaries. Hallowtide and this building stem from the same thing. And Hallowtide actually represents 3 days. So today we think, of course, of Halloween, which is the 31st of October, get it right. All over the place, fell at the first hurdle. And as somebody correctly pointed out on here, it is, of course, All Hallows Eve. That's where it comes from. And hallow, of course, means saint. So hallowed ground we might talk about. These days, just as like to talk about a football pitch or a sports ground, as we are to be talking about the saints. But a hallow is somebody with a halo, same word, okay? Somebody who's a saint, but who's been a martyr. Somebody who's played a very significant role in the church. So the Feast of All Hallows Eve, on the 31st of October, is the feast day before the 1st of November, which is All Saints' Day. And on All Saints' Day, we celebrate all those who've been venerated. The saints, the martyrs, those who are on the way to being saints, go through the kind of on their way to canonization. They're kind of the process that they have to go through, beatification, and all these kind of elements in the kind of Catholic faith on the way to becoming fully fledged saints. And so All Saints' Day is the first. But the second, Ronnie, hold that thought, we're going to come to the pagan very shortly. And does anybody know what the 2nd of November is? Because it's the third day of Hallowtide. So let's see. I promise not to Google. This is about what we already know. And it's not a quiz, it's more a case of interesting to see how far spread, if you like, these old ideas still are. Because, of course, at the time when the Minster was built, what we're talking about is absolute religious orthodoxy. That everything that we're talking about today was the normal belief system. Okay? In the period when the Minster was built, of course, York's Minster starts 1220. Its building work goes on to 1475, so it spans 250 years. Imagine that. Whole lives, and deaths, of course, of craftspeople spending their entire work on this building without ever seeing it completed. So the period that this was built was the period of high Catholic Christianity, when apart from a relatively modest number of Jews living at the margins of society in Britain, everybody accepted the same religious orthodoxy. So I don't think the chat's too far behind, so I'm going to spoil the surprise. Apologies if you're just trying to type it, but the 2nd of November is All Souls Day. So we've got All Hallows Eve. We've then got on the 31st of October, we've got All Saints Day. And we've got All Souls Day. So the difference between All Saints Day and All Souls Day is All Souls Day covers everybody else. Everybody else that has been a Catholic Christian. So in other words, it's a prayer for the dead. So Halloween, in its religious Catholic Christian sense, is a 3-day prayer, celebration and veneration of the dead. So that's kind of a marker. I don't know kind of to what degree people are kind of familiar with this as an idea, but in the medieval period, certainly in the time when the Minster was being built, when it was in its heyday, so Lethargy's heard of All Souls Day, perhaps hadn't quite realised the significance. What's interesting is in almost every culture around the world, irrespective of whether you're talking about Catholic Christianity, whether it's the ancient Egyptians, the Incas, the Hindus people, all the ancient people have ideas, the Mexican Day of the Dead, about what happens after we die, how we can celebrate the dead, how we can commune to the dead. In Mexico, of course, don't they? They're going to have picnics around the graves. Apologies if that's going to skim over. I'm not that knowledgeable about it, but it's the idea of being able to come and commune with the dead, isn't it? And it seems that these ideas, so somebody mentioned before about, let's say you're Catholic. Well, Catholicism was the only game in town. It's fair to say, so the Catholics were, if you like, that was the Holy Roman Church. So consequently, if you didn't agree with the Catholics, it's very, very likely you were going to be condemned as a heretic. And of course, that would mean you could be treated very, very badly. But what the Catholic Church believed, of course, was that they were taking their lessons directly from the Scriptures. They weren't making it up. They were simply taking the stories set out in the Scriptures. So when we look at the Minster here, we look at these fabulous, intricate carvings. Now, it's important to say that these carvings have been recently done to replace corroded medieval ones. But have a look at what we see, the story of Adam and Eve, story of the falling into temptation. We see coming up Cain and Abel, the sin of anger. Cain about to kill his brother, there's a stone in his hand. Well, you can see that well. And on this side then we've got tales of obedience. Noah constructing his ark, coming down to Abraham, getting ready to sacrifice Isaac on the altar until the ram arrives. So let's ask about pagan origin, and we'll come to that in just a minute. So the Catholic Christian view on death is kind of interesting. It's very interesting actually, and this is where it all becomes a wee bit of a fudge. And I'll explain that for you just a second, but let's just take some views. So then you want to see York as well as talk about Halloween and all Hallowtide and so on. So look at that. Isn't that an amazing look? The blue sky just contrasts so beautifully. So Karen, you talk about a month of the dead. In fact, of course, there's been various lengths. The original sources tell us that the Hallowtide period was 8 days. There's various kind of readings of this, and of course, you haven't got exactly the same practice in all countries. What I'm talking about, obviously, is the English Catholic, the British Catholic, the Orthodox Catholic view. But of course, there was always different theological perspective and different takes because it's based on Scripture. And the true basis of on Scripture is it was written, a lot of it was in Hebrew into Aramaic, or the other way around, I forget which, translated then into Greek, then into Latin, and then into the vernacular. Many centuries later, so you've got all these different translations with a complete lack of original source material for many of it. What we've got is codexes, copies of copies of copies often. It's very, very difficult to find original source. So consequently, you get people, different theologians have different takes on what is being said, what it actually means, and so forth. And there's nowhere perhaps as interesting as this. In most Catholic holidays, it was welded together to increase the compliance of new converts. Well, that's really interesting, Carolyn, you mentioned that. So let's just go around the corner, and we're going to talk about, before we're going to look at some shop windows, let's just go and talk about Constantine, because Constantine sort of begins, I think, this process. If you look for one person that you would say was kind of responsible for the slightly kind of theological muddy waters we find ourselves in thinking about Halloween, which is without doubt has its roots in both Christian and virtually non-Christian faith. The best place to start is with the chap we're about to see, who's the Emperor Constantine. So a bit about Constantine. We come around the south side, the minster, beautiful light shining up on
Newcastle.
There you go, Newcastle, you're on. So we see the beautiful south transept of the minster, the light shining on the central tower. Perhaps God shining his light on this tour to bless our theological approach and subject matter for the day. So Constantine, for those that don't know, was a late Roman emperor. The reason that his statue is here in York, that we're about to see in a moment, he was commander-in-chief of the Roman forces based here. So York, or Iberacum, as it's known to the Romans, was the capital of the Roman Empire in northern Britain. And this is as far north as the Roman Empire ever got. It's the end of the world. It's kind of a good place for kind of theological ideas, the end of the world, isn't it? The line between civilization and barbarity, between Christian and pagan, was right here in York. And what happened was, in the year 306, Constantine's father, who was the Roman Emperor, Constantius Chlorus, was here visiting his son in the end of the world with his entourage when he died. And what that meant was that because everybody was here, then they decided to create Constantine as the new emperor, kind of in situ. They didn't go back to Rome. All the generals, decision makers were here, and so Constantine was made to be the new emperor. Now, what Constantine did, even though he was a kind of warrior, and of course there were certain military struggles he had to sort out first, was that his focal point during his long reign was to try and deal with the problems of an empire that had become stretched beyond manageable. The Roman Empire covered most of the then known world, but much of what united the people within the empire was the fact they'd been conquered by the Romans, which isn't really that much to have in common. So consequently, the Huns, the Franks, the Gauls, etc., were forever warring amongst themselves, making it very, very difficult to manage the Roman Empire from a central point of view. So Constantine's idea was to use Christianity as a social and a cultural glue, insofar as that if he could create a shared belief system, shared custom and practice, it would make perhaps these warring nations, nationalities, ethnicities easier to manage. He's got it, hasn't he? Laurie's mentioning about his position. There's not a lot of self-doubt there, is there? He's kind of going, I've got this. This is, of course, centuries later, but trying to commemorate the moment where he becomes, in effect, king of the world. So his idea is, with Christianity, which would be the faith of his mother, he could create this idea of a Roman identity. Rather than being the defeated subjects of a Roman Empire, they can become Christian Romans. So that's how he uses Christianity. And so these converted nations are often given, if you like, their own version. The early church is incredibly tolerant of other belief systems. So, for instance, Constantine's great invention is Christmas. Christ's Mass. The thing but of course that is celebrated on the 25th of December. But at this point in time, until Constantine, it was at different times of the year because there were different ideas about when Christ was born. Because, funnily enough, in the Bible, it doesn't actually say. It doesn't mention once when Christ was born. And the fact that the shepherds were out in the fields means it's very, very unlikely it was December. But the reason, of course, is December, associated with all manner of pagan celebrations and rituals because of the winter solstice. And that as old as humanity's been observing the night sky, see what happens at the solstice, literally the still sun, this period where the heavens appear to stop moving and the new astral year starts. So the 25th of December has been celebrated all through time. So they latch on the 25th of December and say, let's make that the celebratory point of the Christian faith. And so, of course, at that point, you then say, okay, so what in effect you've done is you've taken a bunch of pre-Christian winter pagan festivals and given them a Christian veneer. So the narrative changes, but of course what happens is a whole lot of stuff is folded in. So whatever people's belief systems were previous to that, it enables them to say, well, okay, we still get to party, we get some time off, nice food and drink, time with the family. All the traditional elements of the winter festivals are held true within the Christian festival, but the central narrative, the focal point of it changes. But of course, what we're talking about is a pre-literate societies. We're talking about people that didn't read and didn't write. They were simply told, this is what you're going to do, and from now on we're all Christians. So you have to accept it's not really, I'm not being cynical in this. It's simply, how do you manage a populace that is illiterate? By stories, by allegories, parables. Jesus uses parables in the Bible. So incredibly kind of useful sort of factors. So by the time this Christian church was then being sort of set up in earnest, because Constantine left at the beginning of the 5th century, the Romans left, took the Christianity with them. So these islands weren't really properly converted then to the beginning of the 7th century. By that stage, these pagan beliefs had become dominant once more. So at this point, those that have got any Irish links will know about Samhain. Now, it looks to be written Samhain, S-A-M-H-A-I-N, but it's pronounced Samhain. People have heard of that? We've put the Druid thing, the Celtic link. I'm sure that those would be familiar with Samhain. And the idea of Samhain is that there are certain times of the year. Midsummer is one of them. The period around Hallowtide is another, where the atmosphere becomes so thin that it enables those to pass from one side to the other. In other words, people can return from the side of the dead to occupy the land of the living. Samhain, yeah. So it's what we're told about the traditional belief system was that people would disguise themselves as the lost souls, so that the actual lost souls wandering around, looking perhaps to terrorise, to occupy, to, what's the word we say? When you got like a haunting of somebody, you get ecstasy, can't think of the word now, to inhabit, whatever you want to call it. So you dress up during this period so that the lost souls would wander past you thinking you were one of those. It'd be like dressing up as a zombie in a zombie film or playing dead, right? That same sort of idea. And so, of course, many people say this is the origin of dressing up in costume at this time of year. So how does this then fit with the Christian orthodoxy? Well, let's have a look over here. Possessed, that's the word I'm looking for. So over here, we have someone who's got a beautiful shaft of golden light. I think God is happy with us today. You're doing great. I don't know, Laurie, is the answer of the light show. So this was a college of priests founded in the medieval era to sing masses for the dead. And it's really important, this, because it's a really, really important concept that both helps to clarify what Halloween is, but also muddies the water enormously. In the Catholic belief system, what is said, of course, is that when you die, if you're a non-believer, you would go straight to hell. You made your choice. Tough, too late. If you are a Christian, a believer, chances are you've not been good enough to go to heaven. You have to go through a place called purgatory, a place of judgment, of discomfort, of fire. Some will go straight to heaven, but the majority will spend some time at least in purgatory, in some form of torment, like a mini hell. And then, of course, the second coming of Jesus, the dead will be resurrected, will all come back, will be judged. St. Michael with his scales. Remember all that? Weighing your soul against your sins to decide where your eventual location is. So from a Christian point of view, what this means is that in effect souls after death are not living, but they are in purgatory. And those that have gone to hell, of course, can't be around because they're trapped in hell. So this makes belief in ghosts problematic because by its nature, the implication is that a ghost is some form of lost soul that is walking the earth because it cannot find its resting place. But of course, it's sort of, the Christian church tolerates, or has never really been able to work out a good, clear sort of narrative that kind of works on a logical level on what ghosts are or what they aren't, because it fervently believes in life after death. It fervently believes in resurrection. The dead can come back to life. It's the problem of whether they die and where they stay in the meantime. The veil is it. Absolutely, this is it. This is the idea of the veil, this idea of this gap. So when we look at the great east window of the minster here, okay, so we're looking at, the, and I promise we're going to have shop windows in a minute, but I just thought we'd try and get this kind of stuff nailed down because it's important. Well, it's important to me anyway, is this window, the great east window, the finest medieval stained glass window anywhere in the world, to my mind, certainly the largest, is largely a depiction of the end of days. It was paid for by money that was given by Christians prior to their death for intercession, people to pray on their behalf, for priests to pray for masses to the dead. It does look good, doesn't it, as sunrise, so I'm going to try and keep that in your photo as long as possible. So intercessions, the idea that people on the earth can help with the progress of your soul through purgatory. Really important idea. And so much money was given, it paid for building works like this. Now the bottom two-thirds of this window portray the end of days and, of course, the final battle with the devil. And the devil, of course, is an interesting part, isn't it? Because if we say that Halloween's really nothing to do with the church, but then we look at the iconography, witches and devils, we're sort of straight back into, aren't we? The fear factor. When we think about the devil, how does that work? Well, if you think about when Jesus is in the desert, he's tempted by the devil, isn't he? And what does the devil say to him? He says, if you'll worship me, you can have all these lands in front of you. So, of course, if it wasn't his, it made no sense, would it? So quite clearly, we're made to believe that the devil was in control of the earth. It was his to give. But the devil considered it a triviality. He would far prefer to know that he could make his peace in the spiritual world than worry about the physical one. So it does allow, and is consistent then with the Christian belief that the earthly world was full of temptation. It's full of demons and sprites. And that, of course, is where the saints came in, because the saints protected us from the demons, from the sprites, from temptation, that helped keep us on the even keel, on the straight and on the narrow. Of course, sunrise. Yeah, the full quote. Yeah, for sure, Polly. I am summarising here without trying to get into sort of too deep, but just to get these ideas really across. So in a world populated by temptation and the agent of the devil, the saints performed an incredibly important function. They were like the superheroes, like your Marvels, right? You'd pray, you'd have feast days. But by the sort of 7th and 8th century, they realised there was more saints than there were days in the year. So consequently, you create All Saints' Day. So All Saints' Day was created as a day where we could venerate those saints that could really help us out, protect our welfare, protect us, but there wouldn't have days left for them. So consequently, All Saints' Day, All Hallows' Day, and by dint of it, All Hallows' Eve, was created because we needed more ways of celebrating the saints that were there. So I don't know to what degree that kind of makes sense as a kind of primer, but it's just sort of some of the ideas that are kind of behind. So as we walk along now, I'm going to start this second half of the tour. We're going to have a look down the pretty streets, and we'll have a look at what people have done and kind of what the iconography is and what we're kind of seeing here. So first one we're looking at, little boo, little ghost up here. Spiders. I wonder where spiders kind of come into Halloween. Does anybody know? What's interesting as well, of course, is we have the pumpkin and we have the autumnal colours, because this is very much related to harvest, isn't it? There is something about harvest, which is the end of life, but it's also the beginning, isn't it? It's when the wheel begins to turn. We move into with the cold, dead period of winter before we come back to spring, new life, and everything coming back of sort of vitality. So shot through nature is the idea of death and rebirth. Very cute little ghosty kind of thing. He's caused his sun to rise on the evil and the good. It says rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Yeah, it's powerful stuff, Polly. The Revelation of St. John actually is what, if you go back to the window I was talking about, if you go online and have a look at the images of the Great East Window, you'll see it very much is. We might have sweet completely off topic. I know. Ghost garland. That's very cute, isn't it? So again, we've got pumpkins as being both representative of the pretty chandelier, that isn't it? Of being, obviously the jack-o'-lanterns, as you guys might call them, or kind of pumpkins, we just call them over here. But it's bringing to mind the harvest as well as. We had turnips, dawn, exactly the same. We didn't have much smaller, so pumpkins now. So brooms with the whole cinnamon. Isn't that interesting? So again, with cinnamon, some of these spices that were said to scare away evil presences. So for the first time now, we're getting representations of witches. Well, witches is pretty much four square. In Christian theology, witches were a thing. And as we know, for several hundred years, many women were, mistakenly, I'm sure, treated very, very shabbily, many of them executed, tormented as witches. And of course, their familiars, black cats. So what we're seeing is a really interesting mishmash here. Again, spiders. And I'm not saying just because what this shop's doing, the witches' broomsticks, is we've got the Christian and the non-Christian. We've got the autumnal. We've got death and we've got life. We've got animals. Last harvest, Polly's absolutely right. So keeping, all year this sense of people being able to sort of hunker down and have foods that are going to last them for the winter. Lovely kind of pumpkin. So pumpkin's not indigenous to these islands, of course. Much more of a North American kind of import. The squashes isn't really from this country, but we've kind of adopted them. And especially these mini squashes, quite easy to grow these kind of mini squashes over here. But these lovely autumnal shades, I think, kind of come in. So it's both something that we find comforting. Exactly, pumpkin soup. So a great example is it. These warming, thick, spicy, my nanny says sticks to your ribs food, Eat that and you come to no harm. Those kind of foods where it sustains us, it nourishes us. That kind of food, doesn't it? So there's something wonderfully inconsistent to me about this time of year, which the more you think about it, the harder it is to put your finger on it. And yet, of course, this celebration, this Halloween that we have today, I would say gets bigger and bigger as the years go by. Certainly in this country, I know it's always been a very significant festivity in the USA. I don't know so much about Canada. I'd be fascinated to know to what degree it still has any of its kind of ties into the All Hallowtide, the religious observance, or whether it is simply, a commercial or hammer horror celebration of ghoulish fun. I generally don't know. Are there kind of people that seek to still say that there is a very strong religious significance to All Hallows, in the USA, in North America. I generally don't know. I should know that, really, shouldn't I? But I can say over here, delightfully it doesn't. We just got a wonderful mishmash of the ancient traditions, so the dressing up, which may well go down to Samhain, all the way back to the kind of the Celtic festivals, so going back for at least 1,500 years. Trick-or-treating, so the trick-or-treating came to the poor or children, dressing up, going from door to door, and being given soul cakes. And soul cakes were a thing that you baked. They had a cross on them, of course, and eating a soul cake would mean that you were helping a soul in purgatory. So again, trick-or-treating, whilst it's now very much associated with the fun of Halloween, has its roots in the Christian element of helping souls in purgatory, but at the same time has its roots in a completely pagan belief system that is about the living and the dead coexisting at this time of year. So it's a wonderful expression of fudge, and I apologise if any kind of, I don't know if Rev Dot's on, she'll be on my case for saying this, but that to me is the wonderful thing about Christianity, is its ability to accommodate and embrace different creeds and ideas and come together to form it into one narrative that kind of works, yeah, but has these grey areas, these kind of fault lines that run through that. The more you poke them, the more you realise that unresolved issues that were done for the simple reason of bringing people into the church in the period before. So the Wiccans celebrated a religious holiday. Everyone who does celebrate it, just partying, trick-or-treating, absolutely. So Claire, the 70s, 80s child, Halloween costumes, much smaller scale, I completely agree. When we were children, I think we were probably roughly the same sort of vintage. Halloween, Bonfire Night, November the 5th, was a much, much bigger, I think, kind of celebration for most people than some lovely fun ghosts a bit. Yorick, absolutely. Alas, poor Yorick, his eyes were blinking bright. So he's a skull. This is his eyeballs intact. Not quite sure how that works, but again, perhaps the fudge of Halloween is like to bats. So now we're into vampire territory, Dracula. So the idea of the Gothic horror. Of course, the Gothic horror kind of starts to come in, doesn't it, from the latter end of the 18th century. This idea of the undead that feast upon the living, vampires. So another version, perhaps, of a lost soul is being portrayed in a vampire. So again, if we were to pass, I think down here there's a fancy dress shop. So I'm sure in this window there's bound to be a bunch of costumes, and you're probably going to find Gothic people, aren't you? So you're going to find Frankenstein's monster, not Frankenstein. Frankenstein was the doctor, but Frankenstein's monster portrayed, Dracula portrayed, and various characters that we're likely to find in Gothic fiction are also now found within the if you like, the pattern. What would you call the mood board, as you might say, for, look at York's ugliest strip there. I'll point you this side. For Halloween, it can be anything, can't it? There is really no restriction on what a Halloween costume can be, from a witch to a ghost to a Gothic horror character. Chances are one that's been inspired by a Hollywood treatment. So when we think about Frankenstein's monster, we think about what it looks like in the film, rather than necessarily what he is look like in a book. And so let's have a look what they've got in their window. And so, of course, they keep things up to date. So now, in this dressing up shop, we've got stuff related to Stephen King, isn't it? We've got Jason mask, isn't it? Friday the 13th films. We've got, is that a Scream mask portrayal? Certainly Jigsaw there for those that watch the kind of Saw films. So again, it's embracing here, we're getting contemporary horror genre being kind of woven into it. So it's almost like, it seems that there's absolutely no limits on what Halloween can be. If we look at this dress over here, we've got Day of the Dead. So the US also has homecoming, football and bonfires. So a lot of family coming together, isn't it? So it does suggest that it's a time of kind of celebration and an orthodox kind of witch's costume right in the middle. Robbing a house where she lives, dressed up at the outside with monsters, ghosts and witches. It just seems to be a time where we're very accepting of a great mishmash of things that don't really hold together, other than we can sort of say, oh, it'll be a Halloween costume. Because really there's nothing that holds together a clown and a cat, or a spider and a ghost. But at Halloween, it seems that we go, yep, fine, I can cope with that. That makes sense. So I think what we'll do is we're going to have a little walk down, go to see up Petergate and Stonegate, see what they're doing in shop windows. I haven't been down here for a while, so I don't know. So I'm literally encountering and presenting it as we find it, which I think is sometimes a fun way of kind of doing tours, is to react and respond to what we see. So first of all, we got skeletons. So again, what is a skeleton? Skeleton, of course, are mortal remains, usually pictured with eyes, of course. But if we think about, again, the Christian perspective, our bodies, whilst we're going to be resurrected, we're given a brand new body, aren't we? We don't have to worry too much about the bodies that we have. That's kind of this life is the body. So when we're thinking about skeleton, we're often thinking about the kind of presentations of death. This idea of memento mori, this idea that we're all going to die at some stage. And we've got a very interesting... Yes, thank you. We've got a... I don't know if you've seen these transitombs. In the medieval period, again, when these buildings were being built here, there was almost like a rejection of the body. The kind of great art was like Christ, Man of Sorrows, where you sort of see the suffering and the passion of Christ, where he's almost like he's almost emaciated and almost corpse-like on the cross. Of course, he dies, but it's almost like he's already dead. That life has come out of it. He is the same lad as earlier, and he's even noisier than he was before. Obviously, a Newcastle fan rather pleased with these teams up. So this kind of Man of Sorrows idea, of Christ's suffering, was then adopted within the kind of the Christian orthodoxy to kind of be the body didn't matter. So often you have a thing called transitombs. I don't know if you've seen transitombs. There's one in the Minster, but there's lots around, and it's where you'll see somebody laid out in a very grand tomb. And at the top layer, they'll be portrayed in all their garments, and garments whether they're a lord or a bishop or whoever. But underneath, you'll see a rotting, emaciated corpse. And the idea was to say, no matter how grand you are in this life, we're all going back to the worms. So again, skeletons very much kind of part of this idea of death, spiritual kind of rebirth. So is it Christian? Is it not? If you can answer that question, do send me a postcard and let me know. All I can say is yes and no. It seems to be both. But that's okay. We can live with ambiguity. We can live with fusion, I think. This is pretty, isn't it? I'm liking this. So this is a Oils, Vinegars, Gusto, Theatre of Tastes. So again, we've got ceramic versions of the pumpkins. And again, the idea here, not to scare us really more, it's about autumnal. It's a celebration. Of course, he's got the jack-o'-lantern face. It's a nod towards Halloween, but for the most part, it's more about getting into an autumnal mood. So, but of course, down here we do as well have the face of death. So, it does seem ashes to ashes. Does absolutely. That is a fundamental idea, isn't it? Is that we come from nothing, we return to nothing. Our bodies are mere vessels for the soul. It's what happens, what we do in this life with our souls. What happens to our souls after death? That is the deciding element, right? That's kind of central to all this. This is the sort of central question, isn't it? Whether we're Christian or otherwise, what happens? We all want to know what happens when we die. Is it nothing? Is it something? Will it be nice? Will it hurt? Will I go, damn, I wish I'd followed this faith or the other? Will it go, I wish I'd followed another faith? Maybe one faith's right and the other one's wrong, who knows? I guess there's only one way we'll all find out, and that's when we die, right? Maybe it's too late then. But what's fascinating about, as I say, this period is the way it so easily accommodates both the Christian, pagan, the Gothic horror, the Hollywood horror, rebirth, harvests, autumn, the ideas of dust to dust, and some do, yeah, obviously, some of Christmas. There seems to be so many ideas kicking around, but all sit underneath this idea of Halloween. And it perhaps doesn't surprise me, actually, that increasingly people decorate to autumnal themes with a nod towards Halloween, because what it means, of course, is you get a lot longer and more value out of your window display. So this one, whatever this is, a Zendi, they're saying, look, every leaf speaks bliss to me, fluttering from the autumn tree. And that is, if you didn't know, is the wonderful Emily Bronte, who I adore, talk about a fair bit. See what the Cat Gallery is doing for Halloween. So he perhaps got a better value for money by doing a shop window that is autumnal rather specifically Halloween. Let's see what Halloween products there are for the cat lovers amongst you. And there certainly are some you'll not be surprised to see. So, of course, we are in black cats. Absolutely right, black cats and witches, right the way back, for absolutely centuries, at least 700 or 800 years. There's this association of black cats and which they're familiars. Of course, Macbeth, you know about the familiars. Grey Malkin is the cat, isn't he? So aren't they wonderful? Look at that. The archback cat with its tail up. Robin's got the catalogue from here. So you can have a little Halloween cat there that sits and waves at you. And what do you call that? It's not like not tinsel as such, but a little garland of kind of Halloweeny stuff down here. So you can have a spider, if you say which. Oh, there we've got little witch is familiar. In the Book of Spells, a little kitten there, peeping over. Got the lovely pair of socks right at the back there. The purple, the pumpkins, the bats in the moon. So really are kind of bringing in multiple elements of. And over here, look at this. This is an unusual one. We've got a bunch of kittens coming in and out of a skull. It is expensive, yeah. So it's time to wave the cats goodbye. So give them a wave. They're waving at you. For those who don't know, this is the lucky cat of York. Let us walk on and see what we can see. And then we'll perhaps head down towards Betty's and finish up. I'll see what we're doing for time, but we definitely want to see Betty's window because they will, no doubt, have something in store for us that is both autumnal and should be Halloween-esque, I have no doubt. So the light, I think, is absolutely lovely now. The shop windows, of course, give their kind of brightness. It sort of creates then sort of periods of sort of slight gloom in between. Even though we've got brightness, we've kind of got brightness in the sky, we've got the light of the windows, but then between those areas, it creates that low light, that gloom, that sort of place in the shadows, where it's very easy for us to imagine these spirits may lurk. At this time of year, when it's very, very easy to pass from one realm to the next, it is within the places of darkness, whether that be physical darkness, the darkness in our souls, that you're likely to find these beings, whatever we're going to call them, are able to transit from one place to the next. So I'm looking around and I can't actually see, at this moment in time, any that have really kind of gone for it. Of course, we've got quite a few skulls. We're in like the gin shop down here, so we've got quite a lot of crystal skulls as bottles, a demon, devil sort of face on that bottle down there. We've got a Day of the Dead, a more orthodox skull up here. And actually, now look at it. So the brewing industry as well. So, of course, not wanting to be left out, their ability. We've got a vampire disco, Nosferatu beer there. We've got a witch beer, a pumpkin spice latte. We've got pumpkin coffee porter, a notorious pog, whatever that is. We've got a grand zombie beer. So, again, every area of the kind of retail landscape is looking for opportunities to shift products at this time of year. So Harrogate Gin seems to be going for the more autumnal. I can't see anything specifically that I would say relates especially to Halloween. Of course, we've got a little squash in there. So it's it used to be Little Betty's, but it's now the Harrogate Gin. So I'll just kind of pop over so you can get a sense of what used to be Little Betty's. So it's now the Harrogate Tipple Spirit Merchant. A very lovely shop front that is indeed. Let's go and have a look at what Betty's is doing, because I'm sure Betty's will have something that is worthy of our time and attention. I'd be amazed if they didn't. Well, I know they have, because I've already been past. But I thought that'd be more on Stonegate, but perhaps they've decided they're holding back. They're keeping their powder dry for Christmas, which is, of course, as soon as Halloween, Hallowtide has finished. But you may be interested to know that actually Christmas in the medieval period actually began at the end of Hallowtide. Once you celebrated the dead, venerated the dead, you then entered Christmastide. And Christmastide actually went all the way up to February, believe it or not. So originally, it was a 4-month festival, which really basically covered winter. It was a time of basically getting ready to shut down and obviously then to celebrate. Actually having some time off because you couldn't farm. The ground is cold and hard. The days are short. So time to come together and feast and to celebrate. So really the beginning, or the end rather, of All Hallowtide is the beginning of Christmastide. But it's been a long, long time since it's been celebrated in that fashion. So that's not really kind of contemporary sort of treatment. But as is so often the case, is an awful lot of the festivals that used to run on for a long period of time are now kind of condensed into, day and meal and event or whatever you might say, because obviously it's not terribly practical to say we're going to have a feast every day for 60 days. And of course the poor wouldn't have the money for a feast every day anyway. So the light getting very decanted. Yeah, it is. I know exactly what you mean by that. So I say when you sort of stream down, what you see is the light catches your eyes coming out of the illuminated shop fronts. But as the light's coming down, then you've got, the sky is lovely colour, and how well that's coming out, a nice sort of pinky sort of tone to it. So we're getting these contrasts in between of sort of light and shade, illumination, sunset sky, and also, then the kind of the shop windows creating this enticing warmth because wanting to kind of come in. We're drawn in, aren't we? As if drawn to the fireside. It's lovely, isn't it? Gorgeous. Look at that. I'll try and get the mansion house in with that. And so there's something that pulls us, isn't there, to the warmth, to the light, to a fireside. You think about the fireside. For centuries, people drawn to the fireside, millennia, not even centuries. So listen to stories. And some of those stories would be ghost stories, legends. Shop lights are warm, yeah, absolutely. So much of our kind of human interaction was based around coming together for communal storytelling, wasn't it? So that's what I kind of like to think of myself as kind of being part of. I'm not a teacher, I'm not even a trained guide, but I do sort of see myself as part of that kind of tradition of storytellers, which I think is a wholly honourable thing. I think stories and dance are kind of some of the oldest forms of kind of human cultural celebration. So I think it's a wonderful thing to kind of be part of, but that's where I kind of see myself. People say, are you a teacher? No, not really. I'm a storyteller. That's what I kind of like. So here we are at Betty's, and you might know that Betty's, of course, would do something that was graceful. So the trick here is looking and seeing to what degree we're looking at things that are natural, and what have Betty's created to celebrate this time of the season. So I believe that we're looking at the moment, the natural produce. So again, the harvest. But as we said, thank you, Polly. That's very, very nice. But I think the thing with telling stories is you want everybody to understand, right? Because that's the whole point of telling stories, is to keep everybody involved. So the thing of a story isn't to exclude, it's to include. It's the most inclusive form. You want everybody to share the same experience at the same time. So that, to me, is why it's a really, really valid thing to do. So we've got, look at here, a basket of witches. What do they call it? A coven. We've got a coven, haven't we, of, must be gingerbread witches. And coming down, getting a little bit, I think, Harry Potter-esque here, because we've got chocolate frogs. And if Linda is on from New York, but if she was, she'll be screeching into light, I'm sure, and going, chocolate frogs, chocolate frogs. If she watches it later, Linda, that bit's for you, I'm sure. So, of course, Harry Potter is another element now. It's been worked into Halloween, because witches and wizards and all these kind of things, the supernatural and ghosts and poltergeists, all these things are all kind of part of it. So, again, it's another treatment, isn't it, of this same ideas. They look gorgeous, Florentines, look at those, how beautiful. What else have we got over here? So we've got some little ghosts, can we see popping out the top? Aren't they just wonderful? They're gorgeous. I'd love to take one of those home. I'd love to send you all one of those each. They are absolutely magnificent. And we've got down here a pumpkin cake. I wonder if it's got any pumpkin ingredients in, because you can make that like carrot cake. I'm pretty sure you can use pumpkin as an ingredient in cake. So it'd be lovely to know if that was. I want to ask them actually. And then like a little marzipan, I'm kind of guessing, over here, creating a little pumpkin. So they are super duper super cute. And what else have we got? So we've got some more of those. And so their theme is frightfully delightful. Here we go. It's the Adams family, isn't it? They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're altogether ooky. They're Betty's scary treats. This is like a massive trademark violation to me, but I'm sure they knew what they were doing. Petit Four's absolutely beautiful. But look at this for a castle. So again, I think we're getting into Harry Potter territory over here. We see the wizard in his realm. Owls. Owls, another element we've not come across so far within this. We've got a vampire, a pumpkin, wee timorous beasties hiding around. Of course, ghosties and ghoulies and wee timorous beasties and things that go bang, things that go, what is it in the night? Bump in the night, isn't it? Robert, what's it called? Burns, Scottish guy, right? So we've got a lady witch over here with her cauldrons. Her cauldrons, again, another element we're not seeing so far. Witches and cauldrons, bubbling potions. Again, frogs. Eye of newts and all these sort of things that go into spells. So again, it's all written in, isn't it, to this vocabulary, this language of Halloween. You should, Robin, say you're as long as you can to another witch there, sort of recumbent on the roof, and her cat, familiar, just over here. We've got some ghost biscuits. Absolutely delightful. I was joking about the trademark violation. I was talking about, of course, about the Addams Family lyrics, but I'm sure it's probably out of copyright by now. The Halloween cake again. So isn't that lovely? Last couple of ghosties to look at. So isn't that just delightful? As ever, Betty's doing itself and York and Yorkshire proud. So how are we doing for time? Somebody give me a time check on there. I think we're about 5 minutes to the hour. Who thinks that we should go down to the Shambles to finish our little soiree? Our little Halloween-esque soiree walk around York. And Grace, it'd be a lovely time for you to come this time of year. Do think about that. Autumn. In fact, any time apart from summer, I would say. Summer's great, of course. But of course, the streets are rammed and busy. And it's kind of cute, I think, that it gets dark a little bit earlier. And so the lights come up and you get, something like quite cosy, isn't there? As long as you brought the right clothes. That's the thing, is it? They say there's no bad weather, just the wrong clothes. So, and that can be difficult if you're coming sort of transatlantic. You don't want to bring in thick, heavy garments. So maybe just go shop when you get here for a nice thick coat. But other than that, I think it's a lovely time to come autumn. It's a real kind of, it's a really nice time to be in York. I would definitely recommend it. Spring's good too as well. So I would say, come in autumn or spring. Christmas, it's rammed. It's so busy. And yes, we'll be down here at Christmas. The Christmas markets will be down this area we're coming into now, where the Christmas markets are going to be. So they'll be beginning of December. So we're coming to that time of year. It's not too far away at all. And it's all to play for. So let's have a walk down and let's see what we can see down the Shambles. I haven't been on the Shambles in a while, so I don't know. I'm hoping that the York Ghost Merchants will have done something that is suitably seasonal. It'd be hard to imagine they'd pass up on this opportunity of doing so. So Sam Square, the lights of the trees, all looking rather nice, isn't it? It's very easy to just come and spend time in York. But as I say, I thought we'd just have a bit of a sort of pre-Halloween thing, just try and get you thinking about really what Halloween is and what it means. And after this tour comes off, for those watching it later, what does it mean to you? Put some comments in the underneath the video. That'd be good. Let's do that. Let's put down some memories, but also maybe what you think. Does it seem to you to be something that is culturally important? Is it merely a commercial deal? Does it feel the same now as when you were kind of growing up? Let's get a stream going in the comments under this video. Don't have to write masses, but just give us a sense of what was it like when you were growing up. What's it like for you now, wherever you are in the world watching this? Tell us what this means to you. Does it make sense? Did I help by pointing out these different elements, or did I make it more confusing? Was this a learning experience, or was it merely clarifying what you already knew? So again, we've now got a presentation in the window, a ghostly, spectral lady. Isn't that wonderful? I'll see if I can get us a link to the cat gallery, and I'll tell them that I need one, and we'll get a PDF link. Next Saturday, Whitby for the Goth Festival. I may well head over that way as well. Go and see what we can see in Whitby, if the 4G's half decent. Let's just head down to the Shambles just to finish off and just see what their windows are doing down there. Excuse me if I get through. Thank you very much. And again, nice lights coming from the market school. So Shambles Market, Newgate Market as it historically was. The adjoining market to the Shambles, which you know of course was place of the butchers. So this is a place of slaughter and death. Let's see to what degree, if at all, that's reflected in how the Shambles is dressing itself. Either way, having an excuse to walk down York Shambles is scarcely needed on these tours. I know, and I think you'll agree that the light is starting to come into its own. So yeah, rather than necessarily doing it all in the chat now, because I can't read that, and others won't be able to read it later, if you put it on comment underneath the video, so if you go underneath the video, you'll find place of comments, and then I can read all those later and reply to them, and maybe ask questions of you guys. I'm going to find out what you think. So not comments in live chat, comment underneath the video, if you know what I mean by that. That would be absolutely perfect. So yeah, some Christmas decks are in place, not lit up as yet, but have been affixed in place. So let's have a look at what York Ghost Merchants, if indeed they're doing anything different. They're ghostly all year round, aren't they? So maybe they feel it is sufficiently ghostly as it is, without needing to add an extra layer of Halloween on top. It doesn't appear that they have anything additional than what we would normally have, but nonetheless, it's always good fun to have a look in, and there are very, very many of these ghosts. Liz Bram's got a couple of them, everyone apparently utterly unique, individual, handmade every week on the premises. They're doing incredibly well. The sensation, of course, of Instagram. These businesses that have done incredibly well off the back of Instagram sharing. So I thought they might have more of a kind of window going, but they don't. But nonetheless, let's just finish off down the Shambles, and we'll see if there's anybody that has put on a display that is worthy of our attention before we sign off, say sayonara, and wish each other well until the next time we three see each other. Macbeth, right? The Witches. When shall we three see each other? Again, eh? Isn't that fantastic? In a bit of Macbeth with Shakespeare thrown into you. And that, of course, Shakespeare wrote that play to please the new king, James I, because James I was fascinated with witches and witchcraft and magic and all things related to Halloween. So basically, to get in with the new king, because obviously Shakespeare had been very heavily patronised by his predecessor Elizabeth I, in order to get in with the new king, he writes Macbeth and makes the supernatural the central theme of the play. So there you go. So Halloween, the supernatural, those stories was used by Shakespeare to kind of ingratiate himself with the new monarch of England. So I guess we've been using these ideas for a long time. This is quite interesting. So now we're kind of getting a bit Wicked Witch of the West, I would say, with the green fingers over here. Kind of Wizard of Oz. So once again, a new idea, creeping in new icons, if you like. Well, not new, because it's 1930s, isn't it? But new representations, new derivations of how we can present and say, this is... Hey, Bing? Nice diffuser. Okay. So new presentations of how we might think about Halloween, and it just seems that we can just keep on adding. There's never going to be a time where we go, right, I know, okay, that is it, Halloween is now full. We can't accept any new entries, because something like Harry Potter comes along and suddenly everything can fit in. It is like the ultimate, Santa's sack, that no matter how full it appears to be, there's always room for more at Halloween. It can all be embraced into this idea. It can all sit within this time of the year. So the last shop on the Shambles has actually got a bit of decoration. So we're just going to have a look at that before we call it a day. Because my voice is going a little raw. And so there we go. So unfortunately these are plastic rather than... rather than natural, but nonetheless that's because they'd last rather longer. Again, hands coming from a grave, so the idea of coming back from the dead. So this idea of the dead coming back to life, which is both simultaneously Christian and non-Christian all at the same time, which is also, of course, true of Halloween. So I do hope you've kind of enjoyed my, what I'm going to call it, a bit of a primer on Halloween, some of the ideas, the thinking about it, the elements that it incorporates. Hope you enjoyed walking around York. As I mentioned at the top, I'm actually going away for a few days tomorrow for the very first time since Hago shut down. I'm taking some time off, some time out to enjoy myself. I am more than ready for a break. So Mrs. John and I are going up to Scotland for a few days. So I'm going to be somewhere else, which is lovely. So it'd be any way you're able to support me. That's lovely for this tour. Thank you very much. The grandson's doing a lot better. We'll use it to put towards treats for our holiday for a few days. Three days away in Glasgow, but very nice indeed. So thank you in advance for any contributions you make, and I shall enjoy them, raising a tipple to you all in Glasgow in Scotland, and one or two places we plan to visit while we are up there. Show you the York Gin shop in there. So thank you everybody. Has Mad Alice Gin been launched by York Gin. So thank you everybody for joining me once again in York. It's been I think a really interesting tour today. I hope it didn't get too heavy. I think we can all, as long as you keep it light, I think understanding about theology and belief systems, I think is really valid. I think it's kind of very important, isn't it? That we can not just take things at face value, but we try and dig in a little bit and understand why things are the way they are, how it was that we've come to accept and adopt things like Halloween without really thinking about it. What does it mean? What's it about? What does it say about us? Is it the same as what it used to say about us? And to what degree is it driven by culture or commerce? So I hope that you found this a kind of interesting sort of discourse, as well as a fun walk around York at the end of the day. There's lots of ways to skin a cat, and hopefully this is another treatment of York we've not done before. So hopefully you felt it was valid, and I look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. So thank you from York. Do give me a follow on my channel. If you're not subscribed to me already on YouTube, do please do so. As I say, put some comments underneath this video. So when the video is published, when you look at the video, scroll down and the space underneath which says comments. That's where I'd like you to put down some thoughts on Halloween. What's it mean to you? Tell us about what it used to mean. Is it the same? Is it different where you are in your part of the world to what we've looked at today? Are there anything I've missed? Are there any images? We've covered so many different ideas of what Halloween could be. So are there any I've missed? Any great icons of Halloween that simply haven't appeared today and you're thinking, I can't believe I didn't see that. That's just the very essence of Halloween to me. So do drop them down in the comments, and I look forward to reading those very, very soon. So thank you from York, and goodbye.